I never wanted to admit I was scared of my own house. Growing up, I always pretended I was cool with all the weird stuff that happened in the old family place on Malbury Road in Elmwood. My family's had the house since the 1940s, when my great-grandparents bought it. 80 years of history, and I guess 80 years of whatever else lived with us. Last week was my last night there. I'm 16 now, and we finally moved to some new suburban estate on the other side of town. My mom says it's for a better school, but honestly, I think she was just as ready to go as I was. While I was packing up my room, all the memories of the weird things I've seen came rushing back. I figured I should write them down before I try to forget them for good. I should probably start with the worst thing that ever happened to me in that house. About 3 months ago, I was just doing normal teenage stuff, scrolling on my phone in bed. It was around 11 p.m., and I was starting to get sleepy. I remember it clearly because I had a maths exam the next day, and I kept telling myself, 5 more minutes, and then I'm putting the phone down. My leg was hanging just past the edge of the bed. It wasn't really dangling, just sort of resting over the side. Suddenly, I felt something freezing cold wrap around my ankle. It wasn't a draft or a light touch, it was actual fingers gripping my skin. Before I could even process what was happening, it pulled me so hard I was dragged right off the bed. My whole body went flying to the floor, and my heavy wooden bed frame slid halfway across the room. I screamed so loud my mom came running in. When she flipped on the lights, of course, nothing was there. But my bed was clearly not where it was supposed to be, and I had a nasty friction burn on my elbow from the carpet. My mom tried to tell me I must have had a nightmare and kicked myself off the bed. But I was wide awake when it happened. And my dog, Peppa, refused to come into my room that night. He whined at the door, but no matter how I called him, he wouldn't cross the threshold. He knew something was in there. It wasn't the first weird thing to happen in our house. Everyone who's lived there has a story. Last year, my brother Jake had his girlfriend, Alyssa, over for dinner. She was helping me bring the dishes in from the backyard after we ate outside. Suddenly, Alyssa froze, her face totally white. When I asked what was wrong, she just pointed at the old oak tree and whispered, "Who's that woman?" I turned around and saw her, the lady in the Victorian-style dress we've all seen at some point. She was just standing there, staring at us with a blank look. I'd seen her before, but it was Alyssa's first time, and she almost fainted. The strange thing is, she looked so solid when she was gliding around, not blurry or ghostly like in the movies. But if you looked at her for more than a few seconds, she started to fade around the edges, like she was dissolving into the air. I first saw the Victorian lady when I was 12. I was taking clothes off the line in the backyard. My mom still insisted on line drying everything in the sun. I got this feeling like I was being watched. When I turned around, she was standing about 3 meters away, just watching. I dropped the laundry basket and ran inside, crying. My mom hugged me and said, "You saw your grandma's friend, didn't you?" Like it was a perfectly normal thing. My family was so chill about this stuff, it was like they were just our weird roommates. One winter night last year, winter in tropical Australia, so it was still like 20 degrees, I came home from my mall job exhausted. When I opened my bedroom door, it felt like walking into a sauna. The air was heavy hot, and there was this tangible feeling, like the air itself was angry. I was too tired for any paranormal nonsense, so I said out loud, "Hey, can you please just go away?" Not a good time, and I swear, within a few seconds, the room went back to normal, and the heavy feeling was gone. Maybe sometimes they just want some attention. About a year ago, I was in the shower around 11 p.m. Everyone else in the house was asleep. My mom usually goes to bed at 8, and my sister, Mia, is usually out by 9. While I was washing my hair, I heard my mom laughing right outside the bathroom door. Her laugh is really distinctive, this high-pitched cackle when she finds something truly funny. I called out, "Mom," but there was no answer, just the sound of footsteps heading out to the backyard. When I got out of the shower, I checked my mom's room and found her fast asleep, had been for hours according to her sleep tracker. As I was standing in the hallway, confused, Peppa suddenly went racing down the stairs, barking like crazy toward the backyard. I looked out the window, saw nothing, but Peppa kept running back and forth along the fence line like he was chasing someone. The next morning, there were muddy footprints on the patio, and they didn't match any of our shoes. Mia had some freaky stuff happen too. When she was 7, she refused to sleep in her room because her toys would fly off the shelves at night. Not fall, but fly like they were being picked up and thrown. My mom thought she was making it up until she saw a stuffed bear fly from a high shelf and hit the opposite wall so hard it popped the button eye off. Then there was the wardrobe in the living room. No one liked sleeping there because the doors would just slide open and shut all night. They weren't light doors, heavy wooden ones that sometimes got stuck. You'd normally have to yank them to open, but at night they would just slide open slowly, stay open for a few minutes, then slam shut. Our cousin Liam stayed over once and pushed a dresser in front of the wardrobe before bed. In the morning, the dresser was moved and the wardrobe doors were wide open. Not all the spirits in the house were scary. When my grandpa passed away 2 years ago, I was heartbroken. We were super close. The night after the funeral, I was crying in bed when I felt someone sit down on the edge of the mattress. I wasn't scared because I just knew it was him. Then I felt another presence, much softer, but so familiar, even though I'd never met her in my life. I knew it was my grandma who passed before I was born. I felt like she was telling me she had been watching over me all along. It explained a lot, like how I survived falling out of a tree when I was 8 with just a few scratches, or the time I almost walked in front of a car but felt something pull me back at the last second. Call me crazy, but I think my grandma was my guardian angel. The footsteps in the hallway became so normal, we stopped mentioning them. Around 3 a.m. every night, heavy footsteps would walk from one end of the upstairs hallway to the other, then back again. We checked the floors for loose boards, checked the structure, but nothing. Sometimes the footsteps would stop outside a bedroom door, just stand there for a bit before continuing. Our old cat Mittens died when I was 9, but for years after, we'd still hear her meowing at the back door around feeding time. Plenty of times, I'd wake up feeling a small something jump on the bed and curl up at my feet, just like Mittens used to. There was this warm weight, but nothing to see. One of the spookiest things was the knocking on the window. It was always during a storm, a steady knocking on my bedroom window, like someone was trying to get my attention. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I checked so many times. No tree branches near the window, just empty space and a 6-meter drop. The knocking on the front door was a regular thing, too. 3 clear knocks, you'd open the door, and the hallway would be empty. It happened so often we started saying, just no one there, without even checking anymore. There were spots in the house where you always felt watched. The top of the stairs, the corner of the dining room, and the whole basement. I hated doing laundry because the washer and dryer were in the basement, where it always felt like someone was standing right behind you. I got into the habit of talking out loud when I was down there, just to calm my nerves. Just doing laundry, don't mind me. Please don't kill me, thanks. On my last night in the house, I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I felt those cold fingers intertwine with my hand. Not grabbing or pulling, just holding my hand. I didn't pull away. It didn't feel threatening, more like a goodbye. I whispered, "Are you coming with us to the new house?" The feeling disappeared, and the room suddenly felt empty in a way it never had before. This morning, as we loaded the last of the boxes into the truck, I swear I saw the Victorian woman standing and watching from my empty bedroom window. When I looked again, she was gone. I don't know if the spirits will follow us or if they were tied to the house. Part of me hopes they stay, especially the thing that grabbed my foot, but I think I'll miss my grandma's presence. The new owners are a young couple with a baby on the way. I wonder how long it will take for them to realize they're not living alone. Should I have warned them? Maybe, but I didn't. Some things you just have to experience for yourself. We left an hour ago. I keep checking my phone, half expecting some ghostly fingerprint to pop up on the screen. Nothing yet, but the day isn't over. I've never told this story to anyone outside my family. To be honest, my hands are still shaking as I type this, even 19 years later. I don't have any answers for what happened that day, but I need to share it with someone who might understand or has been through something similar. This happened in the summer of 2004, when I was 14. My family lived in a quiet suburb near Bergen, Norway. Our house was nothing special, just a regular two-story with a finished basement. The basement was our hangout spot for me and my older sister, Ingrid. We had a TV down there, some old furniture, and it was where we wanted to get some privacy from our dad. My mom died just 3 months before it happened. She fell down the basement stairs one evening while she was carrying a laundry basket. I was at a friend's house, but Ingrid was home and heard the thud. My mom was gone before the ambulance even got there. She broke her neck in the fall, died right there at the bottom of the stairs, at the entrance to the basement. I still have nightmares about not being there. It was a rough summer. My dad tried his best, but he was drowning in his grief. Ingrid, who was 16, pretty much took over the household. She cooked, she cleaned, she looked after me while dealing with her own pain. We got a lot closer after Mom died, spending hours just talking in the basement. It felt kind of strange to be down there after what happened, but it was like we felt closer to her in that spot. On July 11, it was unusually hot even for summer. The air was heavy. Everything felt slow. Dad was at work, and me and Ingrid were sitting on the old sofa in the basement talking about some stupid TV show. I was facing the entrance, and Ingrid had her back to it. Every single detail of what happened next is burned into my mind. Mid-sentence, I saw something appear next to the doorway. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, but then it got more solid. A white ball of light about the size of a tennis ball, just floating about a meter off the ground. I stopped talking and just stared. "What is it?" Ingrid asked, but I couldn't answer. The light started to grow, stretching both up and down until it touched the floor and the ceiling. It was unlike any light I'd ever seen, bright white but not blinding, like it was vibrating or shimmering. Then a sound started. It's hard to describe, but it was a high-pitched sound, starting low and building up like something powering up. Not exactly mechanical, more like electromagnetic, but nothing like any electrical sound I'd ever heard. It made the hairs on my arms stand up, and I could feel it in my teeth, like biting down on tinfoil. The whole thing lasted about 10 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. The light kept stretching and changing shape, always staying in contact with the floor and the ceiling. It looked like a doorway or a tear in the air. That's why I always think of it as a portal, as crazy as that sounds. "Do you see that?" I whispered. Ingrid turned around and her jaw dropped. She stood up, backing herself against the wall. I'll never forget the look on her face, pure shock. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the light shrank back and vanished. The sound stopped too, leaving us in a dead silence, just our own gasps. "What the hell was that?" Ingrid said. She rarely swore, so I knew she was truly freaked out. "You saw it too?" I asked, so relieved I wasn't just imagining things. We cautiously walked over to the spot. Nothing. No mark on the wall. No burn on the carpet. Nothing to show what had just happened. I touched the wall, and it was perfectly normal, not even warm. The weirdest thing was the location. The light appeared exactly where my mom had died, right next to the doorway at the bottom of the stairs where she was found. We ran upstairs and stayed in the kitchen until Dad got home. When we told him, he was concerned but tried to find a logical explanation. Ball lightning, maybe, but the sky was clear and there hadn't been a storm for weeks. Electrical malfunction, but the light appeared in midair, not near any outlets or appliances. Reflections from a car, but the basement couldn't see the street, and the windows were small and high up on the wall. For weeks after, I couldn't go down to the basement by myself. Ingrid was braver, but she would always stop and just stare at that spot. We never saw anything like it again. But sometimes when I'm home alone, I'll hear that high-pitched sound start, only to stop after a few seconds. Maybe it's my imagination, or maybe something is trying to come through again, but can't. We never moved from that house. My dad still lives there today. Ingrid and I left for college years ago. Ingrid doesn't like to talk about it, but I know she remembers it exactly as I do. She became very scientific and logical as she got older, studying physics and working in engineering. Sometimes I wonder if what we saw that day influenced her career choice. As for me, I've spent countless hours researching similar phenomena online, looking for experiences like ours. The closest things are stories about ball lightning, but they usually happen during storms and move differently. I've read about ghost lights and portals in paranormal literature, but most of it sounds exaggerated or has a clear explanation. What we saw doesn't really fit any of the boxes I've found. It wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense, no human form or familiar shape. It wasn't something common like St. Elmo's fire or marsh gas. It appeared in our house on a clear day, in a basement with no unusual electromagnetic sources. The timing is what haunts me most. Why 3 months after my mom died, and right where it happened? Was it connected to her? Was something trying to open a door between where she is and us? Or was it just some natural phenomenon we don't understand? I'm 33 now with a family of my own, but I still think about it several times a week. My husband knows something happened but doesn't push for details because he sees how much it affects me. When my daughter was born, I developed this irrational fear that whatever opened in that basement could find its way to her. I've never let her stay the night at my dad's house, always making up an excuse. I know it's probably silly, but that fear sits deep in my gut. Last year, I finally got the courage to install a camera in my dad's basement, pointing at that spot. He thinks it's for security. I didn't tell him the real reason. So far, nothing unusual on the footage, but I check it every morning. The hardest part is the lack of answers. Science doesn't explain it. Religion doesn't quite cover it. Paranormal investigators would probably just sensationalize it. So it just sits there in my memory, an unexplainable moment that challenges everything I thought I knew about reality. I still dream about it. Not exactly a nightmare, but these intense dreams where I'm standing in front of that light again. Except this time I walk through it. I always wake up before I see what's on the other side. A part of me wonders if I should have touched it or tried to communicate with it that day. Another part is just so relieved that we froze until it vanished. If anyone has ever experienced something similar, please let me know. I've carried this alone for too long. Even though Ingrid witnessed it, she's chosen to lock it away in a corner of her mind. I need to know if anyone has ever seen these kinds of portals or doorways, especially in a place where a loved one passed. I need to know if I'm crazy or if there are truly things in this world that we just can't explain. Things that might connect us to a life after death. And sometimes, in my weakest moments, I wonder what would have happened if I had been brave enough to step into that light. Would I have found my mom on the other side, or something else entirely? I rarely tell this story to anyone, partly because I don't think they believe me, and partly because after all these years, it still scares the hell out of me to talk about. But I need to get it off my chest, and maybe someone out there has been through something similar. When I was 4, my family moved to Oak Ridge, into my dad's childhood home. It was a regular 3-bedroom house on a quiet street. Nothing outwardly creepy about it. Just a normal family home with beige siding, a small front yard, and a slightly bigger backyard with an old swing set. It was a place that was nothing special. But from the very beginning, I felt like something was wrong. I can't explain it well because I was so young, but I remember always feeling uncomfortable in certain areas of the house. I wasn't a scared kid. I actually love horror movies and ghost stories, but my parents' bedroom always gave me the creeps. Nothing dramatic like cold spots or weird noises, just this feeling of being watched. I avoided going in there whenever I could. When my mom would ask me to grab something from their room, I'd sprint in and sprint out as fast as I could, always feeling like someone was right behind me. My parents never seemed to notice anything, and neither did my younger brother, who was born 2 years after we moved in. Life went on, and I got used to the weird feeling, chalking it up to a kid's imagination. Fast forward to high school, I was 16. One afternoon, I was home alone while my parents took my brother to baseball practice. It was about 5 p.m., still bright outside. I was doing homework in my room, sitting at my desk which faced the hallway. I heard the front door open, nothing weird since my parents would sometimes come home separately. I looked up from my textbook and saw my mom walk past my doorway, heading towards my parents' bedroom. She was wearing her blue work jacket and had her purse slung over her shoulder. The weird thing was, she looked really angry. Her face was tight, eyebrows furrowed. She looked right at me as she passed, and we made eye contact. I immediately started racking my brain, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Forget a chore. Failed a test she knew about. She didn't say anything, just gave me a hand gesture to come to the room. You know the one parents use when they're mad? The get over here right now kind of wave. That's what she did. My stomach dropped. I got up and followed her down the hall, trying to think of what I'd done. When I got to my parents' bedroom door, I stopped. The room was empty. "Mom," I called out, confused. No answer. I figured maybe she'd gone into the bathroom, so I waited a few seconds and knocked on the bathroom door. "Mom, what do you need?" Silence. I opened the bathroom door. It was unlocked, and the room was empty. By now, I was starting to feel frantic and worried. I checked my brother's room, thinking maybe she went in there for some reason. Empty, too. I walked through the whole house, calling for her, but nothing. Her car wasn't even in the driveway. I was completely alone, just as I had been before. In a total panic, I grabbed my phone and called her. She answered after 3 rings. "Hey, honey, everything okay?" Her voice was normal, relaxed, with no hint of the anger I'd just seen. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice shaky. "I'm at Aunt Carol's house, remember? I dropped your dad and brother off at practice and came over to help her with the garage. I've been here for over an hour. My blood ran cold." I made up some excuse that I'd forgotten and hung up. I sat on the living room sofa until my dad and brother got home, not daring to go back to my room by myself. I never told anyone about it. What was I supposed to say? I saw my mom, but it wasn't her. I convinced myself that maybe I was just overworked, maybe I'd fallen asleep and dreamed it, but deep down, I knew I was wide awake. About a year later, something even scarier happened. It was the middle of summer, and the AC in my room broke, making it a furnace. My parents told me to sleep in their room since it had central AC. They pushed their double bed against the wall and put a single mattress on the floor for me, perpendicular to their bed. I went to bed first, around 10:30 p.m., lying on the mattress, scrolling on my phone. My parents came into the room to get ready for bed, doing their usual things, brushing their teeth, changing into their pajamas, my dad setting his alarm before turning off the light and getting into bed. I put my phone down and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. It wasn't because I was uncomfortable. It was that old feeling from when I was a kid, the feeling of being watched, now stronger than ever. I lay there for about an hour when I heard a noise in the kitchen. Our house had a layout where from my parents' bedroom door, you could look straight down the hall into part of the kitchen. From where I was lying, I could see right out the door. I saw someone walk from the kitchen towards the bathroom. It was my mom. I could make out her silhouette in the dim light from the hallway nightlight. She was wearing her familiar sleep t-shirt. I figured she got up to get water or something and was now going into the bathroom. I waited for her to come back to bed. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. I started to worry if she was okay. Maybe she felt sick. Then I turned to check if my dad was awake and realized there were 2 shapes in the bed. Both my mom and my dad were still asleep. My mom had never gotten up. My whole body froze with fear. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to convince myself I was wrong. I was too scared to scream, just lay there, trying to breathe quietly. Then I felt it. Something stepped onto the mattress near my feet. The mattress sunk under a weight. I thought maybe my dad got up to use the bathroom and was trying to walk past me in the dark. I pulled my feet up to make room, but the thing didn't move. It just stood there on the mattress at the end of my makeshift bed. I could feel the weight, the slight movements as it shifted its balance, but it didn't take another step. I lay there curled up for what felt like a lifetime. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and opened my eyes. I saw a figure in a white t-shirt walk out of the room. It looked exactly like my mom from behind, the same height, hair length, the way she walked. But I could still hear my mom's steady breathing as she slept, just a few feet away. I lay there frozen, watching the thing that looked like my mom disappear down the hallway. Then I shot up and flipped on the bedside lamp. My parents jolted awake. "Elena, what is it?" my dad mumbled, shielding his eyes from the sudden light. "Someone's here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Someone who looks like Mom just walked out." They both looked at me like I was crazy. My mom had been asleep the whole time. My dad checked the whole house, but found nothing. No doors or windows were open. Nothing was missing. No sign of an intruder. That night, I sat shaking on the living room sofa, not daring to sleep again. I finally realized that what I saw the year before, the angry-looking mom, wasn't her. And the thing that stood on a mattress that night wasn't my dad. There was something in the house that could take the form of my parents. It had watched us long enough to perfectly mimic them. The way they walked, their expressions, even the clothes they wore. It knew our routines, our habits, how to appear familiar. The most terrifying thing wasn't that I saw these things. It was the realization that they must have been there for a long time, watching, learning how to be us. How many times did I talk to Mom or Dad when it wasn't them? How many times was I alone with something that was impersonating my family? I'm in college now, living in a dorm, and I make excuses not to go home for the holidays. I can't bring myself to tell my parents the full truth of why. They still live in that house, and as far as I know, they've never experienced anything. But I know what I saw. There's something in that house, watching and waiting, wearing their faces like masks. And to this day, every time someone familiar calls my name, there's a moment when I wonder, is that really them? I still feel sick to my stomach typing this, but I need to share what happened to me and my friend 6 years ago. I've been quietly reading this forum for months, and everyone's experiences have given me the courage to finally tell my own story. I was 17 at the time. My friends Jake and Tyler and our high school friends, and we pretty much spent every weekend at Tyler's house because his parents were cool. Tyler lived in the suburbs of Blackwood, a small town surrounded by dense forest in the Pacific Northwest. That summer, a logging company had clear-cut a huge section of the forest, about a mile from Tyler's place. During the day, we'd sometimes walk out there to mess around, climb on the felled logs, do stupid teenage boy stuff. But we'd never gone at night until that August evening. It was around 9:30 p.m., and we were bored of playing video games. Tyler suggested we walk out to the clear-cut since it was a clear night and there was a meteor shower. Jake and I agreed. I mean, what else was there to do in Blackwood on a Saturday night? The air was unusually still when we went outside. There's usually a constant breeze through the trees, but that night it was dead quiet. We walked along the road that ran next to the forest, using our phone flashlights since there were no streetlights past the last few houses. About 20 minutes in, I noticed a strange orange glow coming from deeper in the woods. It wasn't like a campfire, more of a dull, flickering glow that didn't dance like a flame. "You guys see that?" I asked, pointing towards the light. Jake squinted. "Yeah, what is that?" "Someone camping." Tyler shook his head. "No one camps out here. The ground is all torn up from the logging equipment." We stood there arguing about what it could be, until curiosity won out. Tyler suggested we go check it out, and even though I had a bad feeling, I went along. It's a decision I've regretted every day since. We left the road and headed into the woods, picking our way through broken branches and torn up ground. The logging company had left a mess, stumps sticking up everywhere, deep tire tracks, and piles of dead branches. Our phone flashlights were barely enough, and we kept tripping over stuff. The orange light seemed to dim the closer we got, which made no sense. We'd been walking for about a half hour when I was about to suggest we turn back, and we came to the edge of a ravine. It wasn't on any map, just a sudden, deep gully about 20 feet wide and maybe 30 to 40 feet deep. The weird thing was, when we got to the ravine, the orange light we'd been following was completely gone. "Where'd the light go?" Jake asked, sweeping his flashlight across the trees on the other side. "I don't know, that's so weird," Tyler replied, his voice showing unease for the first time. We just stood there, breathing heavily at the edge of the ravine. On the other side was untouched, dense forest, with pine and fir trees so close together you couldn't see more than a few feet in. I got this overwhelming feeling of being watched, like the forest itself had eyes. I pointed my flashlight across the ravine, sweeping it through the trees, and then I saw it. Standing between two large trees, about 15 feet into the woods on the other side, was a figure. It was human-shaped but all wrong. Unusually tall, slender, with arms and legs that were too long. Its skin was sickly white, almost glowing under the flashlight. The worst part was its face, or rather, the lack of one. Where its eyes and nose should have been was just a blank, smooth, white expanse. I froze. My mouth went dry, and a block of ice replaced my heart. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even blink. The thing didn't move either. It just stood there, staring at us from across the ravine. Finally, I whispered, "Do you guys see that?" My voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Jake, who was standing to my right, just gave a tiny nod, his eyes locked on the figure. I realized he had seen it, maybe for longer than I had. Tyler, who was behind us, was looking at his phone. "See what?" he asked, still distracted. Before I could explain, we heard a whistle. It wasn't a whistle you'd use to call a dog or get attention. It was unnaturally deep, loud, like it was vibrating inside my skull. The sound came from directly behind us, the way we had just come. We bolted. No discussion, no plan, just pure animal instinct. We tore through the fallen trees, scrambling over logs, branches whipping at our faces, our lungs burning. I was sure that if we slowed down for even a second, something horrible would happen. What should have been a 30-minute walk, we covered the distance in what felt like 5 minutes of full-out sprinting back to Tyler's house, slamming through the back door and locking it. We were breathless, covered in scratches and mud. Tyler's mom came downstairs to see what the commotion was, but we just said we saw a bear. She got us some water and told us to clean up, probably thinking we were just being dramatic teenagers. When we were alone in Tyler's room, we tried to process what had just happened. Jake confirmed he saw the same tall, white, faceless figure I did. Tyler didn't see it, but he heard the whistle clearly, said it felt like it went right through his head. We stayed up until dawn, too scared to sleep. The next day, we swore not to tell anyone, figuring no one would believe us. But for weeks after, we spent hours searching online, trying to find an explanation. We discovered stories about similar tall white figures in forests across the country. Some of them mentioned a distinctive whistle. The more we read, the more we became convinced we had encountered something people only see in horror movies. I haven't talked to Jake in 2 years, not since he moved away for college. Tyler and I occasionally keep in touch, but we never mentioned that night. The one time I tried, he shut the conversation down immediately, said he still has nightmares about the whistle. 6 years later, I still can't be alone in the dark. I moved to the city for college, partly because I wanted to be somewhere with street lights and people around all the time. I tell people I'm just afraid of the dark. It's easier than explaining the truth. The worst part is the questions that remain. What was that orange light that led us there? Why did it disappear when we got to the ravine? Was it bait? And the thing we saw, was it waiting for us? Did it know we were coming? These questions keep me up at night, along with a memory of that faceless white figure standing among the trees. Sometimes I wonder if we really saw what I think we did. Maybe it was just shadows, a bunch of scared kids' imaginations running wild. But then I remember the look in Jake's eyes when he nodded, pure terror. He saw it too. We didn't imagine it. I've read enough stories on this forum to know that others have encountered similar things. Some people have names for what we saw, but I'm too scared to write it down. I'm not superstitious, but deep down, I'm scared that saying its name might call its attention back to me. It sounds ridiculous, but after what I went through, I'm not taking any chances. Last month, Tyler sent me a text out of the blue. Do you ever think about that night? I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? That I think about it every time the sun goes down? That I've mapped out every street lamp near my apartment so I don't have to walk through the dark? That sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can hear that deep whistle on the edge of my hearing? I don't know what we met in that forest, and part of me doesn't want to know. But another part of me needs to understand, needs an explanation so I can get past the fear. That's why I'm sharing this now. Maybe someone has answers, or at least can tell me I'm not crazy for still being haunted by something that happened 6 years ago. The only thing I know for sure is that there is something in those woods that doesn't belong in this world. Something that was watching, maybe hunting us. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for someone else to follow the orange light into the trees. I still get goosebumps every time I think about that night. It's been over 6 months, but I can't shake the memory. I tried telling some friends about it, but most of them just want to forget it ever happened. Maybe writing it down will help me process what we went through. It was supposed to be a fun weekend. My friend Jake was turning 25, and we rented an Airbnb in Harborview to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just a second-floor apartment in a regular building, about 3 blocks from the beach. The website said it had decent reviews, and the price fit our budget. There were 8 of us in total: me, Alex, Jake, his girlfriend Mia, my friend Taylor, and 4 other guys from our college crew. We got there on a Friday afternoon, December 15th. The apartment was what we expected, a little worn, but clean enough. It had 3 bedrooms, a decent-sized living room with a pull-out couch, and a small balcony overlooking the street. The host left a welcome note and a few local beers in the fridge, which seemed like a good start to the weekend. The evening started great. We grilled burgers on the small barbecue on the balcony, drank, played cards, and reminisced about college. Around 10 p.m., we cranked up the music and kept the party going. I was a little nervous about the noise. I'm not gonna lie, the walls were thin, and I could hear stuff from other apartments sometimes. Around midnight, some guy from the 4th floor leaned out his window, dumped a bucket of water on our balcony, and yelled at us to keep it down. We all laughed it off and tried to turn the music down, but you know how it is when everyone's had a few drinks. It's hard to be quiet. The party went on until about 4:30 in the morning. Most people had crashed, the couples in the bedrooms, and me, Taylor, and Chris in the living room. I was on the pull-out couch, Taylor was on the armchair, and Chris was on an air mattress. My buddy Damon was still out on the balcony, sipping whiskey and smoking a cigarette. He's always been the night owl of the group. I remember checking my phone before I tried to sleep, and it was 4:42 a.m. I was exhausted, but in that kind of tired state where you can't fall asleep right away. I could hear Damon moving around on the balcony, the clinking of ice in his glass. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember is being woken up by a loud metallic banging. It sounded like someone was hitting the barbecue grill on the balcony with a bowling ball. Bang, bang, bang. 3 distinct hits. I checked my phone, 5:27 a.m. I figured it was just Damon messing around, probably drunk and bored. I was about to yell at him to stop, but the banging stopped. I settled back down, annoyed but ready to sleep again. Then I heard it, a woman scream. Not like in a movie, but a high-pitched, desperate, and terrifyingly real scream. It sounded like it was coming from right outside our apartment door, in the hallway. My blood ran cold. I just lay there, thinking maybe I was dreaming, or it was someone in another apartment having a nightmare. Then the scream came again, louder, more desperate, like someone was in a state of pure panic or pain. I felt a tap on my arm, and I jumped. It was Taylor, her eyes wide open in the dim light from blinds. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. Chris was sitting up on his air mattress too, staring at the apartment door. The scream came again, immediately followed by the banging on the barbecue. Bang, 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 and then the scream. It was like the two sounds were linked. "What the hell is Damon doing?" Chris whispered. Taylor shook her head. "That's not Damon. That's a woman screaming." I finally found my voice. "I'm going to check on him." But before I could get up, the scream came again, cutting through the apartment like a knife. This time it was followed by another sound, like small objects dropping on the floor from the apartment above, then rolling around like marbles. By now, we were all wide awake and terrified. I got up and looked out on the balcony. Damon was standing there, frozen, staring up at the ceiling. "Did you hear that?" I asked him. He gave a slow nod, his eyes still fixed on the ceiling. I thought I was imagining it. What the hell is going on? The four of us stood in the living room, listening. The apartment was quiet for about 30 seconds, and then we heard the marbles dropping from above again, followed by a sound like a heavy object being dragged across the floor. "We need to wake everyone up," Taylor said. I nodded, and we split up. Taylor went to get Mia and the other girls in the back bedroom, while Chris and I went to wake up Jake and Tom. Soon enough, all 8 of us were huddled in the living room. The girls were clearly panicked, and we, the guys, weren't doing much better. Jake suggested calling the cops, but Tom argued against it. Were we going to tell them that we heard weird noises? They're going to think we're a bunch of drunk college kids causing trouble. What if someone's getting hurt? Mia whispered. That scream, it sounded like someone was in pain. I tried to be logical. If someone was getting hurt upstairs, wouldn't we have heard footsteps before that? We'd heard every little sound from that apartment all night, but nothing before the screaming started. Then we realized the more disturbing part. The screaming seemed to come from our floor, right outside our hallway, while the marbles and the dragging sounds were clearly from the floor above. What about the people who dumped water on us? Chris suggested. Maybe this is their way of getting back at us for being loud. Jake shook his head. They were on the 4th floor. There's another apartment between us and them. Is anyone even living on the 3rd floor? Taylor asked. I haven't seen any lights on over there since we got here. We fell silent, listening. The marbles continued to drop, faintly but distinctly, every few minutes. The screaming had stopped, but the banging on the barbecue started up again. 3 quick knocks. Damon, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. My grandma used to say that in ancient Chinese culture, they put marbles on the floor where they suspected bad energy. If the marbles moved on their own, it meant something supernatural was there. Normally, we would have all laughed. But at that moment, with the sound above our heads, no one was laughing. Should we go upstairs and check? Tom suggested, though he clearly wasn't excited about the idea. Before anyone could answer, the scream came again. 3 screams, each one more desperate than the last. It sounded like someone was standing right outside our door. I'm calling the police, Jake said, pulling out his phone. This is not right. While Jake was on the phone with 911, trying to explain without sounding like we were hallucinating, we huddled together in the living room. The marble noises continued to punctuate the silence, and now we could hear footsteps walking back and forth above us. The cops are on their way, Jake said after he hung up. They said about 20 minutes. It was the longest 20 minutes of my life. We just sat there, jumping at every sound. The screams had stopped, but the marbles and the barbecue banging continued. No one dared to go back out on the balcony. Around 6:15 a.m., there was a knock on the door. The whole group froze, looking at each other. "Police," a voice said from the other side. Jake cautiously looked through the people before he opened the door. Two cops stood in the hallway, looking tired but professional. We told them about the screaming, the banging, and the marbles. They took notes, asked if we'd been drinking, we had, and if we were on any drugs, we weren't. One of the cops went to check the third-floor apartment, while the others stayed with us. When the cop came back, he had a weird look on his face. "The third-floor apartment is vacant," he said. "Not just empty, but completely gutted. No furniture, no one inside, nothing. And it's been padlocked from the outside. According to the building manager, it's been vacant for over 3 months." We all looked at each other. If the apartment was empty and padlocked, where did the sounds come from? The cops did a quick check of our apartment and our hallway, but they didn't find anything unusual. They suggested that the sounds could have been echoing from another building, or that we were just imagining things after a night of drinking. They left us their card and told us to call if we heard anything else. After they left, no one wanted to go back to sleep. We sat in the living room as the sun came up, trying to make sense of what had happened. The sound stopped completely once the cops arrived. Around 7:30, we decided to pack up and get out of there. No one wanted to stay another night. As we were loading our cars, I saw an old woman watching us from the window of the building across the street. When she saw me looking, she quickly pulled the curtains shut. Later, I messaged the Airbnb host, explaining that we were leaving early because of a family emergency. I didn't mention the screaming or the police. To my surprise, they replied right away, "So sorry to hear that. Hope everything is okay. Did you guys hear anything strange last night?" The last guest mentioned some weird noises too. I didn't reply to that message. I didn't know what to say. It's been 6 months, and I still don't have an explanation. I researched the building's history, but I couldn't find anything unusual. No tragic deaths or supernatural reports, just a normal building in a quiet beach town. But sometimes, as I'm about to fall asleep, I still hear that scream and the sound of marbles rolling on the floor above me. And I know for a fact that what we experienced that night in Harborview wasn't just our imagination. I've been a therapist at Lakeside Memorial Hospital for almost 8 years now, but what happened last September still gives me chills every time I think about it. I'm not a spiritual guy, even though I was raised Catholic. But this one experience made me question everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what might exist in between. This was at the height of the COVID pandemic around mid-September 2020. Our small, rural hospital was overwhelmed. Being in the Midwest, a lot of people initially thought the virus wouldn't hit our area hard, but they were wrong. We were understaffed, overworked, and emotionally drained. The isolation protocols were exhausting for both staff and patients. That's when I met Herbert Johnson, a 79-year-old farmer who'd lived in our county his whole life. He was admitted with severe COVID symptoms, needing oxygen support. From the first time I met him on my rounds, I could tell Herbie was different. Even struggling to breathe, he'd try to crack jokes and ask how I was doing. "You look more tired than me," he wheezed through his oxygen mask at our first meeting, "and I'm the one who's sick." Unlike a lot of other patients who were angry or depressed about their illness, Herbie had a surprising sense of peace. In our therapy sessions, we were supposed to be talking about his anxieties, but we'd usually end up talking about everything else. I learned he and I were from the same diocese. He went to St. Mary's Church on the east side of the county, and I went to Sacred Heart near town. When he found out I was Catholic too, his eyes lit up, and our conversations became more personal. We talked about faith, family, and farming. He told me about his late wife, Margaret, who passed away 3 years prior, and how he was just waiting for the good Lord to take him so he could be with her again. Despite the barriers of PPE and physical distance, I felt closer to Herbie than I did to a lot of my other patients. He had a way of seeing past the protective gear to connect on a human level, which was so rare in those isolated days. By my third visit, Herbie's condition had worsened. The doctors had moved him to a negative pressure room and increased his oxygen. His voice was weaker, but his spirit was still strong. He asked me if I would pray with him, which wasn't part of my job, but I agreed. We prayed the Our Father together, him struggling to get each word out, and me fighting back tears behind my face shield. "You're a good boy, Marcus," he said after the session. "Margaret would have liked you." The next day, I was supposed to see Herbie, but another patient had a crisis, a young man who just found out his mom had died from COVID in another state. I spent my whole shift helping him through the grief. By the time I was free, visiting hours in Herbie's ward were over, and the night staff was strict about access due to the lack of PPE. That night, I went home feeling guilty that I had missed my session. Herbie didn't get many visitors. His daughter was in California and couldn't travel because of restrictions, and his son was a truck driver somewhere in the Dakotas. For a lot of COVID patients, the hospital staff were the only people they had contact with. That night, I went through my usual routine. Ever since the pandemic started, I had become more dedicated to my prayers. The world was so chaotic, and I needed a spiritual anchor. Every night before bed, I'd light 2 candles, burn some incense, and pray the rosary in a little prayer corner I had in my bedroom. On that Wednesday night, I couldn't stop thinking about Herbie. I wondered how he was doing, if his oxygen levels had improved, if he was scared being alone. The rosary beads felt heavier than usual in my hands as I prayed. By the 3rd decade of the rosary, I noticed something weird. The incense smoke, which usually just drifted around a room, was forming a perfect vertical column from the burner to the ceiling. I'd used the same brand of incense for years and had never seen it do that. It was like there was no air current in the room at all, and yet the flames on the 2 candles were flickering violently, as if they were being blown by a strong wind. I tried to focus on my prayers, but I was so distracted by the contradiction between the smoke and the flames. The room also suddenly felt much colder, even though it was a pretty warm September in the Midwest and my apartment's old heating system usually made the space feel stuffy. I pushed through the feeling of unease and finished my prayers, saying a special one for Herbie's recovery. As I was putting my rosary away, I heard a sound from the corner of the room that I still can't quite place. It was like a ragged gasp, but deeper than any human could make. It wasn't loud, but in the silence of my apartment at almost 1 a.m., it made me freeze. "Hello," I called out, feeling stupid. I live alone in a secure building. There was no way someone else was in my apartment. There was no reply, but as I turned back towards the sound, my phone on my nightstand suddenly lit up. The Google Assistant screen was on, with the little blue waves pulsing, as if someone had just said, "Hey Google." I walked over, heart pounding, and picked up the phone. The screen displayed 1:17 a.m. I hadn't touched the phone, hadn't said the wake word, and was standing several feet away from it when it came on. Afterward, I checked my Google activity, and there was no record of an activation or a command being given. I was too unsettled to sleep, so I stayed up for another hour reading, trying to convince myself I was just overtired and imagining things. I finally dozed off around 2:30, leaving the bedside lamp on like a kid afraid of the dark. The next morning, I got to the hospital earlier than usual. The first thing I did was check on Herbie's status. The night nurse gave me a sad look before I even got to the desk. "I'm sorry, Marcus. Mr. Johnson passed away last night." My stomach dropped. "When?" I asked. She checked the chart. Time of death was recorded as 1:12 a.m. 1:12 a.m. Just 5 minutes before my phone had mysteriously turned on. I was so shaken I had to sit down. The nurse probably thought I was just upset about losing a patient, which was true in part. Herbie had made a deep impression on me in the short time I knew him. But what truly shocked me was the timing and the bizarre events in my apartment the night before. That day, I spoke with a hospital chaplain who worked closely with a COVID ward. I asked him casually about last rites and how they were handling them with the restrictions. It's the hardest part, he admitted, looking exhausted. So many patients ask for it, but with the visitation rules, we can't bring outside priests in. I do my best, but it's not the same as proper rites. Did Mr. Johnson ask for last rites? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The chaplain nodded sadly. He asked for them several times, but his condition deteriorated so quickly yesterday afternoon that by the time I could arrange for it, it was too late. I didn't tell the chaplain about what happened in my apartment. How could I without sounding insane? But in the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Herbie died without receiving the last rites he cherished. He passed away alone, without his family, without the spiritual comfort he was seeking. And at almost the exact moment he passed, something unexplainable happened in my home, in the middle of my prayers. I've replayed that night in my head 100 times. The perfectly straight column of incense smoke, the violently flickering candles, the unexplainable sound, and the phone coming on at 1:17 a.m., just 5 minutes after Herbie's time of death, 5 minutes that in some Catholic traditions is the soul's journey after death. Was Herbie trying to reach out? Was he looking for a connection, for some comfort in his last moments from someone who shared his faith? Was he trying to tell me something? I don't have any answers, just questions that keep me up at night. Since then, I've paid more attention to my patients, especially the ones who are facing death alone. I've started quietly praying for them, regardless of their faith. The pandemic took so much, including the comfort of traditional rites surrounding death. Maybe in that void, something else happens, something we don't fully understand. All I know for sure is that on one night in September 2020, as I prayed the rosary, something connected me to Herbie in his final moments. And to this day, every time I light incense, I watch the smoke carefully, part of me hoping, part of me terrified, that I'll see that straight line rising to the ceiling again.